What does live free or die mean to you?
So to me, it kind of just sparks that New Hampshire spirit.
Yeah.
We're going to do whatever we can, however we can, to make our lives better and the lives of those around us better.
Yeah.
That's really what live free or die means. Obviously, the historical nature of it, back to the revolution.
Yeah.
We're not going to live under tyranny. We're not going to live under oppression. But it's really just kind of like our go-to attitude. First off, it's the best state motto.
Not even close.
By like
even the other states admit
they know because
Excelsior, who cares?
Right. Like it is such a statement on who we are as people.
Yeah.
And what we care about and how we kind of approach it. It's that driving mission statement that bleeds into everything the state legislature does, the governor does, the local towns and school boards. Everybody talks about our tax rate and the no income tax, no sales tax. That's the New Hampshire advantage.
Right.
The New Hampshire advantage is that spirit of
Yeah.
live free or die and how we want to just attract more people that want to live free.
You're listening to Granted Goodness, the show about optimism, progress, solutions, and problem solving in and around New Hampshire. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today we'll be coming to you from our home base, Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, where I'm speaking to Joe Sweeney. Joe is the chairman of the Salem, New Hampshire Town Council and represents Rockingham District 25 in New Hampshire House of Representatives. We talk about Joe's career in public service, his philosophy of solving problems, zoning, abundance, regulation, pirates, energy, and many other things on this episode of Granted Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Joe Sweeney.
Andy, how's it going?
Welcome to Granted Goodness.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you on. You are many things. You know, you're the town of Salem, town council chairman. You have had a storied and interesting and, varied career doing all these different things. You've got experience in like media production and, politics at different levels around the state. And now you're involved in, town administration. And we were talking a minute ago, I'm from Londonderry, which is it doesn't border Salem, but it's like pretty
very close.
Yeah. And I think they're similar in population size as well. But you very much are someone, like I've talked to a couple people who serve or are involved in, different levels of government around the state. But, you are like deeply, deeply involved in the day-to-day, running of one of New Hampshire's, great jewels of towns, Salem. So I'm excited to chat.
I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
The first question we always open with, Joe, tell me a little bit about your relationship with New Hampshire. You from around here? You clearly have made a life for yourself here. Like, where are you from? What do you like about New Hampshire? What are you still doing here?
Yeah, I appreciate the question and the opportunity to talk. I've born and raised in New Hampshire. I guess technically born in Methuen, Massachusetts. Stayed there for a day or two before my parents brought me home to Salem. Yeah. And then I've been in Salem my whole life through the public school systems. Went to UNH for my undergraduate.
Which I think we met there.
I think so, yeah.
In passing at some point.
Did my undergraduate class of 2016. I got my master's in May of 2018 in public policy. I've been in the legislature on and off for the last 12 years. I first got in 2012 when I was 18.
Wow.
Right on. Took a little break in 2016 to get my master's, and then I came back in 2020. Yeah. When there was a lot of stuff going on in the world, and I'm like, you know what? I want to keep contributing my voice to things. And I guess to the question about like what I really like about New Hampshire, what's special to me, I think it's a state that doesn't give up on its people. Yeah. I think we have a lot of rugged individualism. We have that kind of the Yankee frugality. Yeah. But we're a state in which we care about each other. Yeah. That we're here, and we really want to just do the best that we can for each other. And if people are passionate about something or they love something, you can find a way to do it in New Hampshire. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's really great to hear. Your answer just now is echoing several people who I can think of have come on the show. I talked to the wonderful James Q. Wallace. He runs the New Hampshire Business Development Finance Authority, I think. But he basically said the same thing. He's like, look, our job here, we support, the creation of small businesses, and our job is to get to yes, right? Like and he told me, again, we're here to shamelessly celebrate the Granite State, that other states, like they come to him and his office and they say, hey, you actually do this really well. This kind of pseudo arm of the government where it's like you're a little bit public, you're a little bit private, but you just have all these creative levers to offer help to entrepreneurs and help them, get off the ground in creative ways. So yeah, in terms of like, if you want to get something done here, the infrastructure is there to get to yes, right? Like I love that phrase. So you got involved in politics at like a pretty young age.
Yeah.
Certainly an age, younger than I think most people, even people who are like in politics would even consider, and like, tell me about that journey. Like, how does someone, from here, I know we have this like really large legislature, I'm just fascinated by that. Like,
there's a lot to it too.
Yeah.
And so I actually give a lot of credit to both of my grandfathers. Neither of them are still with us, but my papa, who I'm named after, so he was Joe Sweeney.
Yeah.
He was very involved in his city in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Very involved. He helped start the telecommunication union when he was around at what now we know as AT&T, but back then it was Western.
Yeah.
And so he got very involved. And I remember even when he passed away, it was 2008. He was still on the boards of like 27 organizations.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being 14, 15 at the time. I was 14 and a half. And feeling this obligation to like live up to the legacy because I was named after him. And to me, that was kind of like I was named after him to carry on his legacy.
Yeah.
And so there was just sort of that. It wasn't a pressure. It was more of just like, I need to do these things because I can.
Yeah.
Because I can contribute. So that's when I started to get really involved in high school organizations.
Yeah.
So I was very involved in like student council, the class council, the junior ROTC in Salem, the video yearbook, and then the state student council association.
Yeah.
So I kind of got my like the leadership and take charge and get involved in things from my Papa Sweeney.
Yeah.
And then my grandfather on my mom's side, my Grandpa Baggett, him and I would get together every weekend, starting from like when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
Throughout me being into my master's program at UNH.
Yeah.
And we would just talk about how we could solve the world's problems. He would have the news on constantly.
Yeah.
And he would just, I was probably 10 years old and he'd be like, Joey, how would you solve that?
Yeah.
And I had no idea. Right. Like, but
I bet you gave great answers though.
But I had an adult figure in my life that I respected and I loved. And he was telling me that like, oh no, you can create solutions to these problems.
Yeah.
And it just became available to me. And the idea became accessible to me that all of these solutions, any problem that you see on the news, there's a solution out there that's in somebody's head.
Yes.
Everything you see, everything you see on your daily basis was just in someone's head at one point. And it's just whatever you need to be able to get that out and get that solution out on paper, out into the world, is what you need to do. So I think a lot of influence from my grandfathers and obviously my entire family.
Yeah.
But I'm really like the first political one in the family.
Sure.
Which I was the youngest child from my parents. I think that led my parents to scratch their heads a little bit when I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
And we went out to dinner one night. And I was like, I'm thinking about this fall running for state representative, and they kind of gave the pros and cons for it. There's been other young representatives in New Hampshire history, so it's not as rare as other states.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of like, on the fence about whether or not it would be a good idea.
Right.
And then I was like, well, tomorrow in the paper, there's going to be a story about me running. So I just wanted to give you guys the heads up that I was moving forward with it.
I've actually chosen, yeah.
Yeah, so I've already made the decision, but I appreciate the insights and what I should be careful about.
Yeah.
And it's really been a roller coaster ever since, and it's just kind of, I got involved in high school, just going to local meetings, talking about local issues.
Yeah.
In Salem, it was 12 years ago, if you rewind back the clocks, none of the local schools had been renovated. None of the town buildings had been renovated.
Right.
My entire time that I lived in Salem to that point.
Yeah.
And the state, there was a big conversation and debate going on about casinos and gambling.
Yeah.
And we had the racetrack in town, and that was going to save the racetrack. So I wanted to go up to Concord to fight for it. 2012 was a redistricting year.
Right.
So we had 3 seats in Salem that had not been held by anybody. So they were just pure open seats.
Okay.
So I ran for office. I got through. I remember a lot of high school friends registering same day after our senior year to come out and vote in Salem, and I got through in the election. It's been good ever since.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds so like a bunch of your buddies. They were like, yeah, wait, Joe, you're running?
Yeah.
Let's get on. Let's go vote for Joe.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh.
And they're still around. They still check in on how everything's going. It's kind of, it's been the journey of a lifetime, the last 12 years to get to this point. So every time, I meet new people or get involved in different organizations, it just keeps building on itself.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Well, there's this great documentary that is kind of making its way around. You may have heard of it. It's called Join or Die. And it's based, I think, on the work of this social scientist guy named Robert Putnam, and he wrote this book, Bowling Alone, that's supposed to be. I haven't seen the movie. I haven't read the book. Yeah. This is just like what I've learned through shows or other people who talk about it. But it's about, hey, a lot of these, kind of community institutions in America, like churches, right, or meeting places for people that aren't, work or business, like these kind of third spaces. There's less of them than there used to be, and you can kind of see that in a fragmentation of social capital, I guess you might say, right? And then there's all this debate about is there a loneliness epidemic? Is there a loneliness crisis, right? And so these people went and and Robert Putnam lives in New Hampshire. I think he lives in Jaffrey. I'd love to talk to him. But they made this movie about okay, hey, the antidote for this is just join stuff, right? Like 50 years ago, there was a whole beautiful patchwork of local, state, national, all the Elks Club and stuff like that, right? Just join. And obviously it's a play on words on, one of that great poster of the severed snake.
Yeah.
And, but you're someone who you're just living these values, I always hear people say, yeah, we should join more community stuff, go get involved. But this has been an ethos that clearly has been important to your family, that was imparted to you. I think it's great for young people to get enthusiastically involved, and I think you're a great example of that, Joe.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's kind of, my ethos is all we really are what we are to other people, right? It's our relationships that we build with those around us.
Yeah.
That is how people know us,
yeah.
right? We all have our own internal view of who we are,
right?
And we have our internal conversations, and we kind of play out this play, kind of to riff off the Shakespeare, the world's a stage, and we're all just players.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't be authentic about it. You need to be authentic about it, and those relationships with others is how you develop and define who you are,
right?
Because their word and what they say about you is that's the truth, because
right.
that's how they're presenting yourself.
Yeah. And particularly, right, in local government or town or in politics, right, so much of that work and that activity is all things is relationship based, but maybe even especially in those areas, maybe even especially so. One of the things you mentioned in the response to my first question was, you didn't use these words, but the social capital, right? That's people talk about this consistently, from all everyone who I've had on the show and asked them that, they're it's just the people. It's the people in the community, and it is really, really, I know people who, and I'm sure you do too, they've moved to New Hampshire for this reason, right?
Yep.
That there's something about, and maybe it's the shireness, right? Which I could joke about sometimes, right? The Tolkien kind of, the shire's built in, it's in the name, but I don't know. It's granite. Anyway, so another question I have for you, Joe. The New Hampshire State Legislature, I hear all kinds of things about it. I've not served in it myself. Most people haven't, right? Categorically. But, it is unusually large. I think it's something the third largest English-speaking legislative body.
Yep. It goes, Parliament has up to 600 members, depending on their apportionment each year. Congress is 435, and then the New Hampshire House is 400.
Which I love.
Yeah.
Whether people think it's good or bad, I just think that's a fantastic, strange fact about New Hampshire. And, there's a fair amount of turnover, has been an impression of mine, right? Like you mentioned, there are some vacant seats even when you were thinking of getting involved in it. And, it just, some people think it's this wild, cantankerous place. Some people are what, people, they do great work, but you just have to get to know them, right? You hear all kinds of opinions. It's not unlike, real Congress, right? Or national Congress. I would like to hear your view or your opinion on all right, this is an entity or a group of people that, you've been involved with for over 10 years or so, what are some things that you know now, right? Like in terms of different problem solving or like philosophies and getting to know people. Like if you could talk to Joe at 18 years old when he's first getting involved in the state legislature, like what would you say to him?
Yeah, that's a great, profound question.
You don't have to give it. You could.
And it deserves a good answer. I think for me it boils down to, I would tell that 18-year-old Joe that most of the solutions, and whether it's 90%, 95%, they're going to happen without fanfare. They're going to it's not going to be nobody. Not that nobody cares, but it's going to be the people around that committee room, the Republicans and the Democrats, are just going to talk and create solutions. They're going to get a bill suggested by a member.
Right.
They're going to have hearings on it. You're going to have the full resources to kind of research it, and you're going to come to a solution that can go right onto something we call the consent calendar, which is where we deal with a lot of the bills. So it's kind of like when there is unanimity among a committee and everybody's on board, we can just pass it on a voice vote at the beginning of every session. It can go either to the next committee or to the Senate. The Senate can have the same reaction. They can adopt it unanimously. They can pass it on a voice vote. So there's never a debate. There's never a news article about it. And that's typically how hundreds of laws change every year in New Hampshire. And those are the spaces, I think, where there's obviously a lot less drama. But there's a lot more just like rolling up the sleeves and getting good stuff done. Obviously, there are times where we roll up our sleeves and we don't come to an agreement on party lines.
There's plenty of flashpoint issues.
And there's a lot of housing things where it's more of a generational gap between what solutions are between the members. So it's not always just like a partisan fight. Like I think people see on the TV and the news and Twitter or like the fighting. But that is so limited in terms of what is actually going on. And it's because there's just so many people. Like it would be tough. I think if we were in line with like the average for other states, we'd only have like 40 reps.
Wow.
Right? Like it would be so diminished.
You could fit them all in this
room. Right. And we have the smallest state Senate, right? We have 24 state senators. So we have the smallest state Senate in the country, and we have the largest House. Obviously, though, there are state senators in the country that represent 1 million plus people. Right. If like they're in California or Texas, they have huge districts. Our state senators represent about like 60 to 75,000 people. So it's not terribly out of whack for comparison's sakes. But no, I think having that large legislature, having 22 committees now that are all broken down into groups of 20 or less members that are just focused on solutions and finding out how we can make the state a better place, really just makes it so that it is a working body that just at the end of the day, they care because they're going back to the neighborhoods that are affected by these laws. So, and we all have to live under them. There's no exception for it all. So,
well, it's like keep the journalists out and have skin in the game, right? Those are my takeaways.
And it's funny because I'd love there to be more media in the state. I'd love there to be more conversations about the mundane stuff that we're doing. Because so many people think like, oh, you're going to Concord to vote on this controversial topic. And it's like, a little bit of the time.
1% of the time.
But like most of the time we're focusing on like, all right, how do we get more stop signs? Or like, are we doing rotaries or intersections, which has become like a very technocratic debate over the last few years. As to like when there's a state route and it needs to be upgraded, like do you put in stoplights or do you put in a rotary? And that becomes a locally heated thing, but then like it doesn't get any traction around the state. So it's just like there's things like that's just fascinating what is caused by the conversations that just go on. No, that makes me very happy to hear.
And not for nothing would kind of confirm my priors, right? Like that is my view, right? As like someone who kind of like you, I think, is laser focused on like, all right, who's solving hard stuff? What's actually being done, like a kind of away from the pomp and circumstance and, all the things that are designed to get you to like look at it and be like, oh my God, wow, look at that. And you're being very diplomatic and modest, but I would suspect like if I was in your position and there was some really, as you say, technocratic, like complex issue that rolls along, like, man, all right, what do we do with this new street, or like, what do we do with the stop sign and like whatever. And then it just comes across the wrong group of people, the right group of people, they learn about it in some way. And then it's like the peanut gallery shows up and everyone's got an opinion, and, and you're like, listen, this, like, by all means, it's democracy, like, voice your opinion. But it's also the republic part, right? Like,
right.
Like you have elected representatives to work on this stuff and they want to hear your voice, but we've been working on this for months. And then it's like, I think the nature of civic engagement sometimes, as well intended as a lot of it is, it doesn't lend itself always, like, people will, maybe they over orient towards like only showing up for the really controversial stuff, right? As opposed to like, no one wants to talk about sewer tax rates and stop signs, right? And like, that's actually most of the work, it sounds like, of municipal government.
No, and that's the other big component, is so much of the stuff that impacts our day-to-day lives happens at your local town or city hall, right? It's like the city hall, the town hall, that has the biggest impact on your local property taxes, on your local rules and regulations, your zoning, where you can live, where you can find those third places. And then it kind of tiers up to like the state legislature kind of has that second level of influence over your day-to-day, but is more just kind of guiding the ship.
Right.
And then like Congress and like what happens in DC is so disconnected to how like it impacts like a person's life in New Hampshire. I mean, obviously there are hot button things that come up. But I think like the benefit of like what's going on in towns in New Hampshire and what's going on in the state legislature is it's not designed to be a reactionary body. Which I think it sort of has the ability to kind of cool the tempers of what's going on, because you, as a rep, you get elected, you can file legislation in November until like the first week of December of the year that you got elected in. And then all of that legislation starts getting drafted and starts having public hearings in January and February. You're not introducing new items during that time, right? Like it's like the whole clump of like the 1,000 bills that got filed in November and December. Those will be worked on from January to June. And then in October, November, we start again with filing new legislation. So it's not like, sometimes if the system doesn't afford itself to, oh, I just read this news article, this is a crisis, we have to respond to it right away. And like, we're going to streamline a bill to solve it. We have the mechanism to do that, but it has to be like a very rare occurrence for something to just kind of go like that and get through, which is nice for New Hampshire because so many of the reps are just normal people. Like they're just regular people that have had careers or they're inactive careers. They're parents, they're teachers, they're cops, they're firefighters, they're medical professionals, they're lawyers, they're accountants, they're sort of everything. They're digital advertising. They kind of do everything under the sun. And so a lot of that, if the public is not showing up and not showing their sentiment, we're kind of protected because the representatives are the public. And they're so close to people and they're so regular that they're not in this separate world that gets, confused and clouded by lobbying efforts or whatnot. It really does, everything has to pass the smell test to a state rep. And so that's how we can do it. And it's a little less rigid at the town level. Like you can bring up something when you need to, which is good. That flexibility is important. Because stuff does just happen. Like there's multiple crashes at one intersection. You need to come down to a solution to it. Whether that solution is going to appease everybody, it likely won't. There's never that perfect answer. But just be the ability to do something and like get something moving, and then somebody else down the road is going to pick up the baton from you and complete it or continue on, because it's a constant evolution.
I very much like how you phrased, your kind of opening remark to that answer. It's not a reactionary body, right? Like, but kind of by design. And people have a lot of opinions on the legislatures in different states and like, should they be compensated? How much? Right? And like, there's a whole argument people have about that. But I'm glad you brought it up, because there is a lot to like, right, about kind of the vision you articulated of like, no, there's something to be said for, not having like kind of career politicians, so to speak, right, being the people who are adjudicating these issues. And, you know, I'm sure people make good arguments one way or the other, but, you know, this idea, I mean, I heard someone the other day, and it was kind of more of like a provocative idea, but I think there's something to it. They were like, we should just do away with elections totally and just do it by lottery, right? Which I know is an absolutely bananas idea. But what they're trying to say with that is like, there is sometimes this nexus of people who like they seek office or they seek power, and then, you know, the relationship with like special interests, blah, 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 right? Like we all know that kind of narrative. And the antidote to that, I think, is some of what you've stated of like, all right, can we just try and keep this, like, if we can get a good sampling of society, right? The different strata, the different professions, the different careers, right? Like that's ultimately what we would want maybe in a legislature, as opposed to just like, I don't know, an alternative to that maybe is more insulated, as you say, from the concerns of quote unquote normal people. I don't know. But it's just, I love you saying it's not a reactionary body, right?
Right.
You have to file stuff in advance.
It's a funny conundrum because I think a lot of folks, when you think of government services, right, whether it's like the DMV or your tax returns or whatnot, your car registrations, you want it to be an efficient system. You want that executive function of the executive branch largely to be efficient. You want it to be speedy and timely for you.
Right.
So I think that's a lot of folks' regular interaction with government is when they want it to be efficient. They want it to be speedy.
Right.
A legislative branch should be the least efficient
right.
entity in a government.
Yeah.
Like things should take its time to get through.
Right.
Because again, unless it's that sort of emergency situation in which there are abilities to just get something through that needs to when there's broad consensus.
Right.
But even usually if you were to do something like that, there's usually years of cleanup legislation that gets filed to kind of clean up that scenario.
Yeah.
You want legislation and something to become law, you know, it's like that, like I'm just a bill, I'm only a bill.
Right.
You want that to take a while. You want it to be, you know, and you want it to be open and transparent. You don't want it to be slowed down for, you know, someone's advantage or because someone's lobbying against it.
Yeah.
Like whether it's going to succeed or fail, you want it to have an inefficient, I'll say, timeline,
right?
So that everybody who's possibly going to opine on it has the ability to do so,
right?
And that way, it's just not, you know, the government's not just coming in hot and changing everything at once. Sometimes wholesale change is needed and desired by people, and there's ways through the budgeting process and whatnot to get a lot of things done at one time.
Yeah.
But it is really the best thing for the citizen and like the average voter is for a government to take its time when it's going through the legislative process, because you will pass, like we've talked about changing the state primary date for 10 years now, right? From September, which is one of the latest primary dates in the country, to June.
Yeah.
And so many times there's been like, well, why don't we just switch it 2 weeks now, and then like 3 years from now you can move it like another 2 weeks and like implement it over time. And that sounds like a great thing, but we haven't changed the primary date in 100 years.
Right. Yeah. So that's a big deal.
So once you change it, it's not changing for another 100 years.
Yeah.
So you either do it right the first time, or you just abandon the goal and the premise of it if you settle for something else. So and there's tons of stuff like that where it's like, you know, it's the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, but you don't want, if you have an end goal in mind and you know that that's going to be the right thing to do, you don't want to settle necessarily for something less, because it usually just gets stuck there. Yeah. And it's very hard to move it that next step later on. But it depends on the topic that kind of differs. Yeah.
No, all this stuff is so interesting, you know, and I will share, like, again, it's not a political show, but I am sympathetic, Joe, to this argument that is topical right now. Certainly, this is a conversation happening at the federal level, which I don't really want to orient towards. But, you know, this idea that human beings, you know, we kind of have an additive bias, right? When we look at a problem, it's like, oh, the thing standing in the way of this being better is like, let's just add more steps. Let's add more processes. Let's add more laws, and, you know, more, you know, guardrails or whatever, right? And like that will fix the thing. And sure, I'm sure sometimes that works really well, and every time it happens, I'm sure it's like well intentioned by some people. But you know, I don't have a sense that this is always like, it's kind of like the surgeon wants to do surgery, hammer, nail, maybe it's inappropriate to say, but like, I think that is the attitude of a lot of legislators is like, oh, well, we're here to make laws, we're here to amend laws. I don't know how often people are going into that process thinking like, okay, can we remove barriers, right? To, because there's, again, it's super complicated if you dig even a little bit into like every sector, how that applies. But at the basic functional level, right, of like, if you just stack on, 500 new laws every year, right? Like, and no one is saying, wait, okay, should we reevaluate some of these? Like, how often do they get removed? Like, there's something to that, right? Yep. But, I imagine it's different at the town level too, right? And maybe this would be a good segue into talking about, Salem and your experience on the council and, as the chairperson now. So how'd you get into all that?
Yeah. So it's, I've loved Salem my whole life, right? And I do feel like a lot of obligation to the town. So when I was 4 years old, I could only speak 27 words.
Okay.
I had a speaking disorder, and I needed to go through the Salem School District for it's called the SEED program, and it was basically 1 year of just speech therapy, and then 2.5 years of weekly visits for speech therapy, just to catch me up to my peers for being able to speak. One downside to that is I haven't really stopped talking since then. But I kind of like,
they're all like, we regret teaching this guy how to talk.
Like, I just know that like I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have the town of Salem, the school district, and the community that had this program that would enable me to speak. And it was kind of like I was born at the right time where this was an option. Like, if I had been born 20 years earlier, I might not have gotten that service, that treatment. And so I just feel like an obligation and a debt to the town and everybody that's lived there, everybody that's going to live there, to like just do what I can to make it a better place. And I think it kind of speaks to what you were just talking about like the barriers that are in place. And a lot of these things, a lot of the government rules and the regulations that we will talk to people today that like really are a hindrance to them, they were introduced with the best meaning.
Right.
The good intentions of the world.
They always are, though.
They always are. And then you take that experiment over 60 years of a town growing as like this, in 1950, there were 4,000 people that lived in Salem because it was a small farm community on the border. And then in the 50s and the 60s, 93 was built. And then that population exploded to the 1980s. It was 30,000 people that lived in town.
Right.
And we're just up to like 33,000 people now. Because we built out the town and everything. But all of our zoning regulations about like where you can build and like what types of housing you can build and what types of commercial you can build, it follows the same pattern that every community has followed since the 50s. And that sort of like suburban development pattern, like where we just kind of said no to the way that things were done for centuries. And we're like, we're going to build housing in one area, we're going to build shops in another area. And so that space is going to be used for that. And to the point you brought up earlier, that's how we lost those third places.
Right.
That's how we lost those gathering parts. Because people were in their cars and they would drive home. They'll drive to work. They'll drive to the store. They're not stopping in between. We've designed roads, and I get on a little soapbox on this, and my wife loves it every time.
This is what you're here for.
I drive on one of the main roads in Salem. Is we design these roads to get as fast as you can from point A to point B.
Right.
And so we design all of our towns so that you can just get through them as fast as possible. And we don't design them so that you would stop and stay a while. But the actual value to the residents and the local businesses is to be that sort of place where people stop and stay a while. Growing up, my parents would bring us to Portsmouth all the time because we could go and park, we could walk around, there's restaurants, there's shops, there's everything. And we have everybody has this vision in their minds as like, what is the perfect downtown town center look like? And you have images of like the Portsmouths and the Exeters and the Keens, and you don't have Route 28 in Salem, New Hampshire. And I remember being like 15, 16 years old, driving down the street with my mom and being like, Route 28 is very ugly. And I love Salem and I love all the businesses there and everything that's been empowered there. But it's not aesthetically pleasing. And it's not like we told people, hey, you can't be aesthetically pleasing. It's just, it's not the design pattern of giant box stores and large parking lots in front.
Yeah.
And you don't have people living there. And it's fascinating when you don't allow residential uses in certain parts of town.
Right.
The places are not places you'd want to live in.
Right.
Every place in your town should be somewhere you'd want to live.
Yeah.
Like it should just be kind of like, this is a little neighborhood. This is a place where people can gather.
There's a bakery, there's a flower store.
Right. And the businesses would appreciate it. Like I like if we could go back 40 years and say to the Demoulas family, hey, you can build these giant market stores, right? But you can also build some housing above it.
Yeah.
And then you'll have dedicated customers that live right above your stop.
Right.
They would have loved to build the buildings that way. Instead, they were told, hey, you can build like 1.5 stories tall. So all you can do is build a supermarket and that's it.
Wow.
And you have to have so many parking spaces in front of it for people to go to that you're not going to have any residential use near it. And then they had to build like that throughout the state.
As someone who, my first job was working at Market Basket in Londonderry, the biggest Market Basket in the state, by the way.
Yeah.
And I have pushed those carts from way out in the Badlands of the giant parking lot all the way back to the store in the dead of winter. It sucks. And I wish it wasn't. I mean, listen, great parking lots, big parking lots, sometimes they're great, but I know what you mean.
We definitely need parking, right? We definitely have people that have cars, and I love my car.
Yeah.
It's the only way that I could get from, I started my day in Salem. I went to work in Manchester. I had a meeting in Concord, and now we're in Portsmouth. I'm going to go back to Salem.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't do that without a car. Right. So I'm not saying, no parking, no cars or whatnot.
Yeah.
But what we need to have that conversation, and we need to get it in people's minds. We think it's a convenience for us, the way we live now. But there's a reason why we're unhealthy. There's a reason why we're just not doing things, because we can get in our cars and we can drive as close as possible to our destination. We get out and we walk for maybe 20 feet.
Yeah.
We get in, and it creates a sedentary lifestyle that we're not thriving.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not maximizing our land use. And that's where, when like the local level and the stuff that we're starting to talk about in Salem, I really just want to give people the opportunity, the property owners, the developers, maximize your land use.
Yeah.
Build what more you can. Let's figure out shared parking solutions for local businesses so that we don't have to have these giant lots. We've built everything for like Black Friday.
Right.
Right. Like we want to have enough parking for Black Friday.
Yeah.
I drive up and down Salem. I drove up and down Salem on Black Friday. There were still so many empty spots.
Wow.
And when every 2 spots is one apartment,
and
you could stack 5 to 6 of them high, that's a lot of housing that, we have this housing crisis. We know the demand is there.
Yeah.
And it's another area where it's just like the government regulations on where you can build and what you can build has caused the crisis in supply. And New Hampshire has the option, and there's 2 paths. One that I don't want to go down, which is just let's develop more of the trees and grasslands that we have.
Right.
And I don't think people in New Hampshire want to do that. We like our forests. We like our hiking paths. We like sort of the open spaces in the rural areas. But like in these communities that were built out as suburbs over the last 50 years, places like Salem, places like Londonderry. Londonderry's doing a lot of housing and a lot of development.
Yeah.
You go to places that have already had pavement on the ground. So you go to like a Route 28 in Salem, you go to the industrial parks, and you say, hey, you can build a little taller, you can build some mixed use and build kind of the thing that the market wants right now.
Yeah.
So you have the retail on the first floor, and then you have residential above, or you have, if there's a market for office space ever again, you can build office space.
Yeah.
But you just give people, and in Salem, I'm calling the zoning reform freedom and prosperity, because I want property owners and developers just to have more freedom and more flexibility to do what they can. And in the end, that's going to make the whole town and everybody in it more prosperous.
Yeah.
It's kind of for a while on Twitter, my bio has been, if the government just steps out of the way a little bit, lets people do more and be more, we're all going to get to achieve more.
Yeah.
And that's kind of finding every area, whether at the local level or the state level, as to how we can just let people do more.
Yeah.
We're going to be really pleased with the results.
I love everything you just said. I feel like in many ways, so many parts of America, but certainly New Hampshire, it's like we're a coiled spring. We have all these great assets, all this innovation and excitement and interest to like leverage the strengths of New Hampshire and just like build, and it's just like, what's in the way, And housing is, I've talked to, people on the show, and you know, it's interesting as you say, like I kind of agree with your characterization. Like that's been my experience of, this is a bit of a generational, like I think if you talk to young people, wherever they fall on the political spectrum, it's like, okay, but we really just need to build more stuff, you know? It's like, and the more things you tack on to like whatever you find acceptable in the building of like, oh no, it has to satisfy. And I'm like a super environmentalist, by the way, but I am someone who like is also, you know, if you don't build enough, you're penalizing the people who didn't get in when you did, right? And that's just not fair. And so, you know, if you want to build an apartment complex, but you need it to satisfy the 32 sacred sustainability criteria first, like, I don't think that is a good idea. Like, I would rather just build the thing. And, you know, again, not against, like, there's a whole conversation to be had about that, but like, just we've been underbuilding for so long was what this guy who is at New Hampshire Housing, Matthew Gallen, said to me. He's like, at this point, we just got to build. You know, just build. So I love everything you're saying. You know, just let them. And it is cool too. Like, I think sometimes people they have, like, everyone knows the community you're talking about, right? Of like, oh, I know this place that I would want to live, or the kind of place I would want to live, or the kind of cool apartment I would want to have with my friends, and not a lot of, and like, it's walkable, and there's shops and restaurants, and God forbid, maybe if it's affordable, right? Like, it's not super expensive, and you know, there's so much orientation around like, man, how do we you know, just change society so that people can make more money. And like, that's great. You know, totally. No one's against that. But I think we lose sometimes the other option is like, well, let's just make things cheaper, right? Like, and if we could just make housing cheaper by building a ton more of it, like you wouldn't have to, like restaurants, right? A friend of mine who came on the show, he's got a restaurant podcast. He's like, he goes all around the country. This is his whole life, is he just goes and he interviews restaurateurs. And, you know, restaurants who, like, they're great people. They run a great restaurant. They do good food and they treat their employees well, like the kind of restaurant you'd want to patronize. And there was this place up in Maine. These people came on a show and they were like, you know, we're a family-owned business. We try to treat our people well. And, you know, we've had to like give them a lot of raises, right? In the past 5 years, especially. And it's really, really hard. Like, we want to do it, but to make ends meet as a restaurant and to really pay our employees a living wage, like, it means something very different in the environment where we chronically underbuild places for people to live for, you know, 20 years, as opposed to not doing that, right? Like, I'm not saying we should do it so that we can pay restaurant employees less, but it just reframes the whole conversation about
cost of living.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, and I think an important element to it that I brought up a couple weeks ago when we were talking about it in Salem is, you know, every community in New Hampshire is spending a lot on educating students. Yeah. Salem, we have 3,800 students in the K through 12, right? So 13 years worth of students. We're spending about $25,000 per student right now. So if we had that for 13 years, we're spending millions of dollars on we're spending $300,000 on educating one student. Yeah. So each classroom is millions of dollars. Yeah. And when we don't have housing for them to move to, we lose that investment. Yeah. Right. It just goes away. Like, maybe we can, there's some housing for them to fit into, but I know, speaking for my Salem High class of 2012, hundreds of students no longer live in New Hampshire because they had to move elsewhere for work, because the housing is there and that's where their job is.
Same for me.
And we can have that that development in New Hampshire where we have housing and office space and we're that commercial hub and that central location. And we don't have to have the brain drain where we're just losing that investment from people, especially kids that we want to go into the trades. That we have the Career and Technical Education School in Salem. We have them throughout New Hampshire. We want them to get trained on a job, be able to start working that job and stay in the community. You can't do that if the housing is not affordable. And to your, like, the only way we're going to see real changes in affordability is if we just shock the system with supply. And we just say, you know, we're just going to open up the floodgates and let people build. And let the market work it out as to how much they're going to build. Because there is that price point where it'll settle, where it's like, this is the perfect price point for a young family to buy in at, whether they got a 3% down or a 5% down, and they're just able to kind of move forward with that.
Yeah.
But it's about making sure that there's housing for the kids that are in New Hampshire that we want to stay in New Hampshire.
Right.
There's such a big conversation about, the pressure from out-of-state movers.
Yeah.
Right. We're to me, we're the number one state in the country.
Right.
We've been advertising ourselves for the last 8 years as the number one state in the country.
Right.
And yet we act shocked when people want to move here.
Yeah.
Right. So like we have to have the market that allows for the out-of-staters to have a place to move to.
Yeah.
But it's also for the people that are from here.
Right.
It's not, we're not supplanting our culture or our values or our character.
Yeah.
We're just going to make it so that it's open. And I think something I've said a lot in Salem is, when I was on the baseball field or in elementary school or in high school or just walking around town with friends, it always felt like a small town to me. But there's nowhere in Salem that looks like a small town. Like we have a small historic district, but you have a 40-mile-per-hour road right next to it. And so the cars are just whizzing by because they're going like 50 and 35.
Yeah.
And so there's nowhere that really feels like a small town.
Yeah.
It looks like it, but like you can create that feeling of a small town just when you surround yourself with others.
Yeah.
And that's what you're longing for.
Yeah. It is an interesting conversation, right? And I'm happy to hear you say that. Like, I don't think anyone really means it. Like, there's often this joke of like, stay away, massholes, right?
Yeah.
The Massachusetts people. And I know what people mean when they say that, right? Like, Massachusetts is a very different state. It's similar in a lot of ways, right? It's our neighbor in New England, but, certainly the government and, a lot of other things, like it's very different from New Hampshire. And a lot of the things that make us unique, whether you like them or you don't like them, right? Like they're unique and they are different. And I can respect wanting to keep that in place and, however unfound, like I don't know how much, whatever it is, the several thousand influx of Massachusetts people would really change things. But I think we should be grateful and happy to like, how lucky are we, right, to be a place that's growing, right? Like, and we want to make it, friendly for families. We want to make it friendly for people, and as you say, it's there's so much to advertise and to celebrate about New Hampshire. It's like we should not be surprised when people. I mean, everyone knows. Like, I bought my house in 2022, and it was. I mean, it's banana land now, and like it just has been forever, and. It only worked out for me because of a connection of a connection of a connection, just because of like whatever. And I'm so happy for that. But like, I wish everyone could have that experience, and it's not fair that it isn't that way. And it's funny you mentioned Londonderry, like to give people a little bit of like my own point of view on this has changed a lot. I heard that, one of the orchards in town, I think was sold and then demolished is such an aggressive word to use, but they put like senior living where the orchard was, and I'm sure like I think, as you say, I think we can develop more while maintaining the historic and the environment. Like there's a lot of farmland and nature that we can and should preserve, and people are more or less in agreement on that. But it would be easy, I think, to hear a story like that and be like, oh man, my beloved hometown, the orchard, it got demolished for some old people home. And then now I'm a little older and I'm like, wow, how great. Like we're building more housing for people who are probably in the prime of their net worth, not to sound totally soulless, but really like older people tend to be worth more, and they're good for the tax base, and that they get to go and be in my town, and maybe they can develop relationships with people in the town and mentor young people and bring their experience and their skills and yes, their tax dollars too, right? Like that's actually a really great thing, Maybe it doesn't always have to come at the cost of an orchard, but like we should think in terms of these trade-offs. And I love the way that you frame these issues as like, this is really just about, opportunity and quality of life for everyone. It's like, how do we make that better?
Yeah. It's awesome that you bring that up. So I think a lot every day about like the old Simon Sinek, like what's your why?
Yeah.
And like, why are we here? Like what is the source of it? Yeah. And there's been there was a boom for like 20 years in 55 and older housing in New Hampshire. And it was because our zoning incentivized it.
Really?
So most communities had zoning where you could build 4 55 and older units on a piece of property where you could only build one single family home, right, on the market rate.
Yeah.
If you build 55 and older, usually the school district impact fee doesn't apply to the development. So it's cheaper to build 55 and older, and you can fit more on the land. So developers were incentivized to just build as much 55 and older housing.
Yeah.
To the point where in some communities were getting too gray.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
like there was an imbalance in like the tax base between
Yeah.
young families and the older residents that
Right.
so we now kind of got to go back and find ways to break down the regulations so that either like market-based housing for anybody can match the same regulations that 55 and up had.
Yeah.
Or we find ways to increase density for starter homes.
Yeah.
Which is tough to do, right? Because anybody can get a home.
Right.
Right. It's like you don't want to put limits on like who can get it. Go for it. And there's conversations about like whether or not like they have to be owner occupied so that you prevent somebody from buying up a bunch of them and renting them out.
Yeah.
So there's so many different conversations going on about how we do this where the market will be incentivized to just build housing that we need.
Yeah.
But we have definitely it was a government overcorrection
Yeah.
that led to so many 55 and older developments throughout the state.
Right.
And so we kind of got to figure out ways like how do we get back to the market building those starter homes, knowing that they're not going to look like what starter homes used to look like, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of, especially in the southern tier of the state, we've run out of space to build full neighborhoods.
Right.
So you're going to be looking at more at like townhomes
Yeah.
and condo buildings and apartment complexes. And I think people just need to kind of get used to that. That's the next thing.
Yeah.
That is what's next. And that's the only way you're going to grow.
Yeah. All right. I want to ask you about something, Joe, because I'm a LinkedIn troll and I love seeing all the stuff you do. You, like a hawk, I see you comment on these people who build, you know what I'm going to say, the modular nuclear reactors. I see you just harass these, you don't really, but you always comment on their stuff. And every time I see it on my feed, I'm like, there he is again. He's going after it. And he's like, can we, hey, I'm Joe, I'm from New Hampshire, I'm in Salem, like, can we do this? Like, tell me about that whole thing.
Yeah. So to anybody listening, watching this, so I actually included small modular reactors in my zoning reform in Salem.
Yeah.
And because we have some industrial sites in town that would actually be perfect for one of their facilities.
Yeah.
What they are the best way to describe them so people would know is they're mini nuclear power plants. They're about 1/100th of the size of one that we have in Seabrook.
Yeah.
And what they allow us to do is they are a newer technology. They are safe, and they provide reliable energy that's clean, using the same tools and functions as a large-scale nuclear power plant with so much less of a risk. I mean, we're talking about a plant that would sit on a 35-acre site that probably has a building square footage less than an acre.
Wow.
But is enough to actually provide power for the whole New England grid.
Wow.
I am very eager to get them to New Hampshire because they are an emerging technology. So there's a couple of projects in the works around the world for it. One of the big things, New Hampshire can always have the lowest tax rate to our neighbors.
Yeah.
We can always do things to make it more competitive to bring businesses here and to bring people here. Our energy costs are consistently out of control because we only have one silo at Seabrook that provides about 26% of the grid of the ISO New England grid's power is just Seabrook, New Hampshire's nuclear plant. We're not, unless the new administration declares a natural gas emergency and puts a pipe through New York, we're not getting any new sources of natural gas. So we have the highest energy rates in the nation. And if we really want to make New Hampshire kind of like stand out along, and I'm talking about like down, like competing with businesses in Texas and in California, where they have cheaper access to energy, getting some small modular reactors in New Hampshire, and we wouldn't need many of them, but bringing them into New Hampshire and adding them to our grid where they can provide power, and then the immediate area around those plants would see significant reductions in their energy rates, which is really the outside of we're so competitive with other states on our tax structure.
This is the
corporate things. Energy and figuring out energy and how we can lead on energy is the next big thing. And if we're looking 10 years down the road and we want to have those AI campuses that OpenAI and SoftBank want to build, we're going to need fast, reliable, and stable power. And SMRs right now are that next generation of things. We need to be open to fostering that next, whatever is next in the energy sphere. Because I think that, to me, is really what the future looks like. And so, on LinkedIn, I've actually talked to a few people at the company too. And they've had great conversations, and they're excited to see. We have Keith Ammon, who's a state rep from New Boston, really led the charge in the legislature on kind of building out the framework for how we could bring an SMR to New Hampshire and how they would operate. And we actually should be adopting rules and regulations on them at the state level this year.
Wow.
So it is kind of like we're like really doing everything we can to open the door. And I'm just trying to get them to come in.
So that would be, so like they have to look at this environment and be like, we should put one there. Wow.
And I mean, because there's a significant cost to building one of them. So that company is going to have to figure out how to do it, but they sell the energy back to the grid. So they make it's a market product at the end of the day. But it's just figuring out what we need to do to get them in here. But we could have a handful all over New Hampshire, and we'd probably have one of the lowest energy rates in the world.
Wow.
So that's how much of a game changer it is, especially with how energy dependent all these new emerging technologies are. So we're gonna need more energy. So I want to get ahead of the game. And part of my being an ambassador for the state of New Hampshire, I guess, is trying to find different companies that will come in here and help us build the future.
Oh, I love it. Well, it's the same. Like what are the constraints on the housing supply? Right. It's kind of the same. Like lifeblood of everything. Right. Energy. You're living somewhere. Right. And it's like. The future's the future. Like, there's no reason why we can't have, not to sound crazy, but like infinite,
Like let's produce more energy than we need and put it back onto the grid and sell it to our neighbors that are in states that don't have as open of policies as we do. That's what we really need to do. And the best part is it's one of those, there are so many wicked problems out there. And I remember at UNH, my political science professor would talk about the wicked problems that don't have an easy solution. From a clean energy standpoint, a sustainability standpoint, a national security standpoint, these small modular reactors are the solution to those wicked problems of energy, because there's the climate, there's the conservation, there's all the different factors in what energy should look like, and it's just a great option for us to pursue, and we should be aggressive in pursuing it.
No, I'm with you. I'm all in. My pro-abundance political beliefs may be showing here, but nuclear, I think, is certainly one of the. You want to talk about lost opportunities, right? In terms of like over-regulating a thing. That's I saw something the other day, and it was mind-boggling. It's like this is what I like about your work, Joe. Right? Is you're so smart, and you're good at commenting on like, hey, there's a cost to the status quo, right? Like. You might have a nice life, right? Like normal homeowner in Salem, but like what you're not seeing is 10, 20 years from now when, your kids or your grandkids, like they can't afford to live around you and we pay all this money to educate them and they leave, right? Like framing all those things so that they make sense for, people who are, more on the layperson side of like, politics or government and stuff is hard. And, energy and pollution even, right? Like, I swear to God, something like 300,000 or a couple 100,000 Americans, they suffer premature death every year from pollution, from different kinds of fossil fuel and transportation and in cars. And it's like, man, we could have just, electrified everything and had nuclear a long time ago. And you think of the cost of that over time, right? Not even, to say nothing of the moral argument that if we have the technology, it's wrong for people's air to be less clean, right? But it's also like I'm always most compelled by like when the moral and the economic line up, and I think they do more and more as the tech gets more advanced, right? Of like, hey, that's bad that all those people have like air pollution issues, but it's also like, boy, we would be so much more prosperous if we had that many extra years of life from happy, healthy,
Right.
involved people, facilitating, commerce and exchange and just participating in society. Like, we really lose a lot when we don't invest in the future. We've talked about a bunch of different things, Joe. Could you tell me, like, what are some of the things that you are most excited about? Like, when you think of New Hampshire and its kind of potential and the things that are great, like, what makes you most excited and most optimistic about New Hampshire and all the things going on?
Yeah, I think it's just it's going to be like a vague answer to your question.
Yeah.
But I really do think like the next big thing is going to come from New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited that I have no idea what it is.
I like that.
Like,
but the conditions are right.
It's going to be here. It's going to be something that is Granite State based, and it's just we are going to be amazed when we see it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just going to, like, there's nothing more inspiring than the next big thing that you don't know about.
Yeah.
And that's just going to turn our heads, and it's going to make us really proud as a state, and it's going to be a good product of the Granite State.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, so yeah, it's the unknown, but the fact that I know that the unknown for New Hampshire is a positive benefit to society.
Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, as you say, right? Like, if you set the conditions, right, for, economic growth, innovation in technology and people coming here and having good lives, right? Like, good things come.
Yeah.
And you can't always predict them, but if you set it up, man, the downstream effects are really, really positive, and they compound over time. I mean, that's the best answer maybe that I've ever gotten.
I love that.
I always ask people what makes you optimistic about New Hampshire, and and everyone gives a fantastic answer, but yours being like, I don't know, but it's going to be great.
Yeah.
is a really good one. You talked a little bit about your zoning, like what is the freedom and prosperity?
Yep.
Could you at like a high level, like, explain, because this feels like a big deal to me, and I want to give it credence and attention. You made this great post the other day. You were like, it's time to do big things, which I agree with. It's time to do big things. Like, what you talked a little bit about it, but I would like to just give you like blue sky, open space. Like, what is that thing, and why are you doing it?
Yeah. So kind of a bird's eye view of the district is we have roughly 3.6 square miles of zone in Salem that is for commercial and industrial purposes.
Yeah.
The whole town of Salem is about 24 square miles, right? But so this is, if you're familiar with the area, it's all of Route 28. It's all of where Tuscan Village is and where the mall at Rockingham Park is.
Yeah.
And it's all the industrial commercial office space off of Exit 2, off of like Stiles Road, Key Waden Drive, Northeastern and Northwestern Boulevards. So this is all commercial and office space that was built out in the 70s and the 80s. A lot of the old Route 28 land used to be farmland, and it just sold into the big box stores, whether that's the Market Baskets. We have 3 in town.
Yeah.
The Target, the Kohl's, the old Kmart is a part of one of the Market Basket lands, the Walmart, but it's everything up and down Route 28. And then it's all the office buildings that were built as like 2.5 to 3 stories in the 70s and the 80s. My whole vision was we're going to take that whole area and allow people to build up to 6 floors. You can build retail on the first floor and build residential condos for home ownership on the floors above it. If you want to build just an office building or a hotel building, my proposal was you could build up to 20 stories. It was a big conversation for a town like Salem because we don't have big buildings beyond what's being built in Tuscan.
Right.
But right now the market for commercial office space is being dwarfed by residential. A residential square foot is about 3 times the square foot value of a commercial office space.
Wow.
So if you had a developer and you're like, all right, well, you can build 6 stories of residential or 6 stories of office space. 10 times out of 10, they're building 6 stories of residential.
Right.
Because that's where they can make money.
Yeah.
Unless you allow them to build up to, 3 times that amount for office space.
Yeah.
That's when they can start getting a return on investment on the office development that's greater than their return on the residential development.
Right.
So a lot of it was just sort of seeing in what other communities have done, but really trying to just give maximum flexibility to developers and property owners to the sort of building that we've allowed in Tuscan Village, which
Yeah.
my wife and I currently live in Tuscan. We rent in one of the apartments.
Yeah.
We love it there, where it's all mixed use, and we can just walk downstairs and we walk across the street, and we have our restaurants and
I know the spot you're talking. It's a great spot.
Yeah.
I love that spot.
and that's just sort of like, that is the kind of the future that the market's demanding for
Right.
housing. And so I just want to have the town kind of step out of the way.
Yeah.
We're not forcing anybody to build that way.
Yeah.
But if you're a property owner and you want to go do it, it's funny. It was brought up that if you own 25 or more acres in Salem right now, you could go through the same process Tuscan has at a large scale redevelopment and be accessible, have openings to all different types of flexibility for zoning and regulations.
Yeah.
So if anything, this is really just saying this, whatever your property size is, you can be aggressive and be creative and show us what you got.
Yeah.
And just come out with the plan and build it, and let's get stuff built. Because as I said, it's time to do big things.
Yeah. Man. So I know that it's a relatively new thing, but I'm sure that you've had, like, what have the conversations kind of behind the scenes like with developers or other people in the private sector, or even if there's been response from them yet?
Yeah, I think I think flexibility and opportunity is what they are motivated by the most.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I don't know if there's a project that, if we pass this today,
Yeah.
right, next week there's not going to be a project submission
Yeah.
for like 15 stories, right? But we're going to be able to tell people around the country that are looking to build.
Yeah.
You can come to Salem and you can really build your wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And we're here to help you, and we're here to benefit
Yeah.
from it. So I know the developers I've talked to, the town councilors I talked to, we had the public meeting on it 2 weeks ago, or just a week ago last night. And it was a really uplifting conversation, because kind of go in there and I'm
Yeah.
like, part of me is like, I'm offering to radically transform how we do zoning
Right.
in the town. And I got out of the conversation alive, and I think I know not all elements of the plan will be
Right.
adopted, but I
Yeah.
know we're going to get somewhere that kind of puts Salem on that next step to
Yeah.
be the next big thing.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that. And I think we'll see after we adopt it, we'll see the demand for it come out. It's going to be kind of like that, like chicken and the egg thing.
Right.
Like, and the community struggle with this all the time.
Right.
And I always, in the back of my mind, I think of, I love the city of Berlin, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Love going up there. I've worked on campaigns where we've had to go up there.
Yeah.
It's a long drive up and a long drive home, but it's just so nice there.
Yeah.
For like interacting with people, and the people there are great.
Right.
100 years ago, they were twice their size.
Wow.
They had 20,000 people
Yeah.
in 1920, and today they have 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And it was only like a generational change,
Right.
right? Like, you lose the industry,
Yeah.
and then you lose everything. Obviously, they were very dependent on the timber industry and the
Yeah.
logging and the paper mills, and that all just went away virtually overnight for them.
Right.
And so it's kind of like there's nothing protecting Salem from that happening too.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing protecting Londonderry or Portsmouth. Like,
Right.
we could all be ghost towns one day.
Right.
And it's just doing whatever we can to not be.
Yeah.
And that's going to be flexibility and adaptable use, and kind of, there's a great organization that I'll give a plug for called Strong Towns.
Oh, yeah.
And I
I've
listen
heard
to
of
their podcast, and
Yeah.
I read their books, and they have a lot of great insights on how parking impacts everything, how just if we could just go back to the traditional way of building things,
Right.
we would be happier people, we'd be healthier people, and our communities would be stronger.
Yeah.
So I just really want to take that sort of strong town mindset and bring it to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And let it just grow and develop.
The traditional way being let people build whatever the heck they want.
Yes. Yeah.
More or less.
Exactly.
Right? Like there's like the joke about, millennials and, their grandparents having built houses from nothing and stuff like that, right? Like, let's bring that back. Like,
Yeah.
who wouldn't want to build their own house? Ah, man. All right, Joe. Final question. What does live free or die mean to you?
Wow.
When you hear that, like, what is it? What goes on?
So to me, it kind of just sparks that New Hampshire spirit.
Yeah.
Of, we're going to do whatever we can, however we can, to make our lives better and the lives of those around us better.
Yeah.
That's really what live free or die means. Obviously, the historical nature of it, back to the revolution,
Yeah.
of like, we're not going to live under tyranny, we're not going to live under oppression. But it's really just kind of like our go-to attitude. First off, it's the best state motto.
Not even close.
By like
even the other states admit
they know because
Excelsior. Who cares?
Right. Like it is such a statement on who we are as people.
Yeah.
And what we care about and how we kind of approach it. And then you see that sort of it's that driving mission statement that bleeds into everything the state legislature does, the governor does, the local towns and school boards.
Yeah.
It really is that everybody talks about our tax rate and the no income tax, no sales tax. That's the New Hampshire advantage.
Right.
The New Hampshire advantage is that spirit of live free or die, and how we want to just attract more people that want to live free.
Right.
So,
I love it. I've been thinking about this lately, and your answer's pinging it for me, right? But I'm going to tell a roundabout story, and then I'm going to bring it back. A friend of mine, we talked about pirates earlier. She knows that I really like pirates, and there's this town way up there in Maine called Eastport. It's like literally like 10 miles from, like you can see Canada from there. You tack the coast, you drive for like 6 hours, then you get to Eastport, right along Maine. And they have this event called Pirate Fest, and it's all about it's just these people get together and they dress like pirates and they drink and dance and stuff, right? And I was there. This was a gift. She got us tickets to Pirate Fest. We went for the day, and we went, and I was up in the town learning about the history of it, and I asked one of the organizers, I was like, so tell me, there must be a history of pirates in this town, right? And she was like, no, we just picked, we started doing this in 1986, and we were just looking for a dumb excuse to get together.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we just picked pirates. But since then, it has become now it is a legitimate, pirate historians will go and they'll go to this thing. And it for the people who do genuinely enjoy and want to dig into the real and robust history of pirates in New England, right? Which is a thing. They go to this thing, which the town doesn't actually really have a relationship with pirate history,
awesome.
Right? And I think that there's something really special there. And I think of Live Free or Die, obviously, right, that ethos, given the revolutionary history of, America and New Hampshire and our place as one of the original colonies, sure, that ethos has been there from the beginning, right? But the longer it's there, I think it becomes more true because, as you say, people hear about it, then they move there, or the people who are born here, they grow up living it, and then they want to make it true, right? So we're in the 250-something year of Live Free or Die, and how cool is that?
Yeah.
And we're going to get to see, I don't know, the future better and better because of people like you. So I just, I don't know, I love it.
I love that. I got to go to Pirate Fest now. So.
Yeah. Or we'll just make our own.
Yeah, why not?
Live Free or Die Fest, right? Or that's kind of what Pork Fest is, but we don't need to get into Pork Fest.
More family friendly.
Yeah. All right, Joe Sweeney, thank you so much for coming on.
Andy, thank you. This is great.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.